She was assigned to study him. The room was cold, silent, clean. Commander Ryan Carter sat alone inside a transparent glass chamber. His hands were tied loosely in front of him, not for punishment, but for control. He had been taken from a crash site. His ship had fallen after an unknown energy surge near an alien moon. Now he was being studied. On the other side of the glass, an alien woman watched him. Her name was Virea. She belonged to a species called the Ilari, a race known for logic, science, and order. Their skin was smooth and blue, and their eyes were glowing silver. Emotions were not important in their world. Only knowledge. Only control. Virea was a genetic behavior specialist. Her job was not to talk, feel, or guess. She was there to observe, and Ryan Carter was her subject. Virea held a thin silver tablet in her hand. Data flowed across the screen. Human biology, hormone scans, behavioral charts, human male. Age, 33. Reproductive capacity, strong. Emotional balance, unstable. That was how her people described him. But Virea didn't agree. He wasn't unstable. He was angry. And maybe he had a reason to be. Ryan looked up suddenly. His eyes locked with hers through the glass. He didn't blink, and neither did she. For the first time, Virea felt something strange in her chest. It was small, quiet, but she noticed it. Why is he staring at me like that? He didn't look afraid or confused. He looked curious, and somehow that bothered her. Later that day, Virea entered the chamber. 2 guards stood outside, but she didn't need them. She had full control of the room. Ryan sat on the bench, arms crossed, expression calm but sharp. "You don't talk much," he said, his voice rough from days without use. "I'm not here to talk," Virea replied simply. Her tone was flat. "Then what are you here for?" he asked. She looked at him carefully. "To observe your reproductive behavior." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Is that how your people say hello?" She ignored the question and turned on her scanner. But Ryan didn't stop. "Do you think I'm just a tool? A machine to study?" Virea didn't answer, but again, that strange feeling returned. That night, Virea returned to her lab quarters. She tried to focus on her reports. Data from his blood, muscle structure, cell response. Everything was normal, but still, something felt missing. Not from the data, from her. She sat by the window, watching stars drift through the sky. For the first time in her career, she wondered, why? Does he look at me like I'm more than a scientist? The next day, she brought him food. It wasn't her job. A machine usually did it. Ryan looked surprised when she walked in holding the tray. "What's this?" he asked. "Meal. Balanced nutrients. No poison," she said plainly. He smirked. "No salt either, I bet." She blinked. "Salt increases blood pressure. That's not good." Ryan laughed softly. "You guys really don't believe in taste, huh?" She didn't answer, but she watched him eat. Slowly, thoughtfully, and then he said something unexpected. "You know, you're not like the others." Virea looked up. "I'm exactly like them." "No," he said. "They stare at me like I'm a puzzle. You look at me like I'm a person." Her heart skipped, just once. She stood quickly. "I'll return tomorrow." He nodded. "I'll be here." Back in her room, Virea stared at the mirror. She touched her face. Same blue skin, same silver eyes. But her reflection didn't look the same anymore. She whispered, "What are you doing to me, human?" She didn't know the answer. Not yet. More than a test subject, Ryan Carter sat on the cold bench, his back resting against the smooth metal wall. It had been 13 days. 13 days inside a glass room. 13 days of questions without answers, no windows, no sunlight. Just food, scanners, and eyes watching him from behind glass. And her Virea, the alien woman who brought him food yesterday. He couldn't explain why she felt different. She didn't speak much. She didn't smile. She barely blinked. But something, in the way she looked at him. It wasn't cold like the others. It was human. That morning she returned. She didn't come with guards, not with machines. Just her. Alone. Ryan stood up slowly, ready for another round of silent staring. But this time, she did something different. She sat down across from him. No scanner. No tablet, no armor, just her. They stared at each other for a few seconds, then she said, "I had a dream." Ryan blinked. "What?" "I don't usually dream," she said. "Our species trains our minds to stay still. But last night, I had a dream. And you were in it." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Okay, not gonna lie, that's weird." Varela tilted her head. "You were laughing, it was loud, and your eyes were soft, not like now." He crossed his arms. "Well, maybe I'm nicer in dreams." She looked down. Maybe. There was silence between them, but it wasn't cold. It was heavy. Full. Then Ryan asked, "Why are you here, really? Not the scientist version, the real one." Varela looked up. "I was assigned to study your reproductive behavior. Your kind connects physical touch with emotional bonding. We do not." "I figured," he replied. "That's why you treat sex like paperwork." She didn't react. Instead, she asked, "Why do humans connect touch to feeling?" Ryan leaned forward. "Because we're not machines." Varela went still. That word, machine. It echoed in her mind like a warning. Because sometimes, that's what she felt like. Later, she returned to her lab. The other scientists were working, typing, analyzing, scanning. One of them, Dralrin, looked up and narrowed his eyes. "You've been spending too much time inside the chamber." Varela answered calmly. "Observation requires closeness." Dralrin leaned forward. "Closeness leads to confusion. Humans have soft energy. They twist logic, be careful." She nodded, but her heart didn't agree, because deep down she wanted to be confused. That night she accessed restricted human data, old Earth literature. She found a phrase. To touch someone's hand is to touch their soul. She didn't understand it, but she wanted to. The next day Ryan was waiting. "Back again?" he asked. She nodded. "I want to try something." He stood. "Like what?" She stepped closer, slowly. Then she reached out and touched his hand, just a touch. But it changed everything. His skin was warm, rough, alive. She gasped softly and pulled back, as if shocked. Ryan smiled. "Now that's human contact." Varela's voice was almost a whisper. "It's powerful." "Yeah," Ryan said. "That's what we're made of." Back in her room, Varela sat by the mirror again. This time she didn't just see her reflection, she saw change. She saw herself, and, for the first time in her life, she felt something, not data, not duty, just her. The day she touched his hand, Varela woke up before the lights turned on. She sat on the edge of her sleeping pod, wide awake, her thoughts spinning. She had touched him, not for a test, not for a scan. She had touched his hand, because she wanted to, and now nothing felt the same. The science lab was quiet that morning. Her team members moved like shadows, cold, focused, efficient. They spoke in brief code phrases, shared data, and ignored emotion. But Varela's mind wasn't on the numbers anymore. It was still in that chamber, still on that moment, still on the warmth of his skin. She opened her palm and stared at it. Why did it still feel like he was there? Ryan Carter leaned against the glass wall, arms crossed, waiting. He knew she would come. Every day now she returned. Not as a doctor, not as a jailer, but something else. And somehow she had become the only thing in this place that made sense. He heard the soft hiss of the door. Varela stepped inside. No guards, no tablets, no fake reason. Just her. And silence. She walked to him slowly, like she was afraid of something but didn't want to stop. He raised an eyebrow. "You're early." She looked at him. "I didn't sleep." "Dream again?" She nodded. "I was there?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "But this time, I wasn't watching you. I was reaching for you." Ryan swallowed hard. "Did you?" "Yes," she whispered. "And I didn't want to wake up." They stood there, just breathing the same air. He didn't speak. She didn't move. And then, she reached out again. Slower this time. Careful. Shaking. She took his hand and held. And not a scan, not an experiment, a moment. A real living moment. He squeezed gently, not to scare her, just to let her know he was still there. Viraya closed her eyes. Her mind screamed warnings. She had crossed a line, touched what should not be touched, felt what was not supposed to be felt. But her heart whispered something different. This is not wrong. This is real. Outside the chamber, a camera blinked. One of the other scientists, Dralren, watched from the main lab screen. He zoomed in, frowned, then clicked record. Back in the chamber, Viraya sat with Ryan on the floor. No tests today. No scans, just questions. She asked, "Do humans always need connection?" He nodded. "We survive alone, but we live with others. But your people are violent, loud, wild." He smiled. "And your people are quiet, cold, and lonely." She blinked. He didn't say it to hurt her. He said it because it was true, and she knew it. That night, Viraya walked past the mirror again. She stopped. She wasn't just a reflection anymore. She was changing. Not her skin, not her eyes, her soul. The next morning, she was called to the high chamber. 6 scientists stood around a glowing table. Dralren was among them. He looked angry. "You have crossed the line," he said coldly. Viraya stood tall. "I am following the subject's behavior patterns." Dralren slammed his hand down. "No, you're following feelings." He pressed a button. The screen behind him showed the footage. Her, holding Ryan's hand. The room went quiet. One elder spoke softly. "You have bonded with the subject." Another said, "That is forbidden." Dralren pointed. "Erase your memories, or be removed from the project." Viraya didn't flinch. She looked at them all and said, "I will not forget him." They stared. She stepped back from the table, turned, and walked away. In the shadows, a decision had been made. She would lose her position, her status, her home. But when she returned to Ryan that night, he stood up, and without words, she ran into his arms, and for the first time in her life, Viraya felt whole. His words changed everything. The lab door sealed shut behind her. Viraya stood in the dark, breathing slowly. She wasn't a scientist anymore. She had lost her rank, her status, her place in the colony, all because she touched a human's hand. And yet, she didn't feel regret. She felt free. In the chamber, Ryan sat quietly. He heard the door open, but he didn't turn. He was used to visitors leaving, but this time she stayed. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said. He turned to her. "They finally kicked you out?" She nodded. He looked at her carefully. "Why didn't you fight back?" She walked to him. "Because you already taught me something they never could." He tilted his head. "Like what?" She sat beside him and looked down at her hands. "You made me feel seen." Ryan stayed silent. Then she asked, "Do all humans see each other this way?" He chuckled. "Not always, but when we do, it means something." Viraya closed her eyes. She remembered the voices of her elders. Love is a distraction. Touch is weakness. Emotion is a glitch in the mind. But none of it felt true anymore. Ryan's hand wasn't a glitch. It was a guide, a doorway. "Tell me more," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About Earth. About how humans love." Ryan leaned back, his voice softer now. "It's messy, sometimes painful, but it's real. We don't just connect with the body, we connect with the soul." She frowned slightly. "We don't have a word for soul." Ryan pointed at her chest. "That part of you that hurt when they took everything away, that's your soul." Varela looked at him with wide eyes. She whispered, "Then it's alive. And I never knew." He told her about human families, about holding hands not just for function but for comfort, about sharing warmth in silence, about the joy of laughter, the comfort of tears, the safety of being held without judgment. He spoke of how two people could become more than individuals. They could become one, not through law, not through science, through choice, through love. Varela touched her chest. "So, intimacy is not a mission for humans." He smiled. "It's a gift." She looked at him. "We have been doing it all wrong." They sat in silence for a while. Then Varela said, "I read an Earth book. It said love begins when two hearts beat together, not just side by side." Ryan blinked. "Which book?" She smiled shyly. "I don't know. I only remembered that one line." He laughed softly. "Well, that's the best part of it. That night they didn't speak much. They didn't need to. He made a small bed for her in the corner of his chamber. She didn't ask for it. He just did it." She lay down and stared at the ceiling. Then she whispered, "Ryan." He looked at her. "Do you believe in fate?" He thought for a second. "Not really," he said. "But I believe some meetings change us forever." Varela closed her eyes, and this time, when sleep came, she dreamed of him again. But in the dream, they were no longer strangers. They were together, their first real connection. The lights inside the chamber were dim. Ryan Carter was already awake. He sat on the edge of his sleeping pad, watching the soft blue glow coming from the floor. The place was quiet now, more like a shared space than a cage. He turned his head. Varela was still sleeping on the small corner bed he had made from folded blankets and spare fabric. Her body rose and fell slowly, peacefully. She looked so different now, not because her skin had changed, but because her walls had come down. When she woke, her eyes blinked slowly. She looked around, confused for a moment, like her brain hadn't caught up with her heart. Then she saw him. She smiled. Not a polite smile, not a trained one, a real one. Ryan smiled back. "Good sleep?" She nodded, voice soft. "I dreamed again. But this time we were dancing." Ryan laughed gently. "Really? I don't even know how to dance." "I think I do now," she said. "In the dream, you showed me." Later that day, they sat across from each other on the floor. Ryan showed her how to play an Earth card game using makeshift cards drawn on old papers. He explained the rules. She didn't care about the points. She just liked hearing him talk. He laughed often. She listened carefully. She tilted her head. "Your face changes when you laugh." "That's called smiling," he said. "I know," she replied. "But I've never caused one before." "You just did," Ryan said and smiled even wider. Then came the moment. It was simple. He reached out, not fast, not sudden, just gently. She looked at his hand, and this time she didn't hesitate. Her fingers slid into his. They locked like puzzle pieces. Their hands didn't shake. Their eyes didn't look away. They just were. Connected. Alive. Breathing the same air, and for the first time there was no gap between alien and human, only two hearts beating in sync. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. Ryan looked at her. "What did you expect?" "A loud, violent species, full of fire, always needing control." He laughed. "You're not wrong, but that's not all we are." She nodded slowly. "And maybe We're not what you expected either. He looked into her glowing silver eyes. No, you're more. They sat like that for a long time, just holding hands, just feeling. Later, she moved closer, not out of need but out of choice. She placed her head gently on his shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But he closed his eyes and a breath left his body like he had been holding it for years. Outside the chamber, security cameras still worked, but no one was watching anymore. The lab had gone quiet. The order to shut down the study had already been given. Soon, others would come. But for now, they had this moment, and neither of them wanted to let it go. That night, Varela asked a question. Do humans say I love you often? Ryan looked at her seriously. No, he said. Not when it's real. She paused. Then how do you know it's time to say it? Ryan answered softly. When silence feels louder than any word. She smiled again. And in that silence, she felt everything. She defied her species. The alarm lights blinked red across the ceiling. The peaceful silence was gone. Varela stood in front of the chamber door, her body tense. Her breathing was calm, but inside her chest felt like it was breaking open. She had known this would happen. Still, it hurt more than she expected. They had come for him, not to ask questions, not to study him, to remove him, permanently. She turned, back to Ryan, who stood barefoot on the metal floor. He wasn't afraid. He looked at her like he already knew what she was about to say. They're coming, aren't they? He asked. Varela nodded slowly. They call it a relocation, but it's not. Ryan stepped closer. You can still walk away from this. Her voice cracked. I don't want to. On the upper level of the facility, the council gathered. Gray-robed Ilari officials stood around a glowing circular table, watching Varela's recorded interactions. Smiles, laughter, physical contact, emotional bonding. It was all considered betrayal. Her bond with the subject is complete, said one. She's corrupted, said another. She must be removed, said a third. Dralren, her former mentor, remained silent, but his eyes were filled with cold fire. Varela ran her hand across Ryan's cheek. Soft, gentle, like she was memorizing his face with her fingertips. I'm gonna get you out, she said. He blinked. Varela, if you do this, I already have, she said. And then she reached behind her back and pulled out a stolen override key. Ryan's eyes widened. Where did you? I have been planning since the day I touched your hand. They moved quickly through the hallway tunnels. Low light, cold walls, narrow passages. Varela guided him with confidence. She had studied every path, memorized every blind spot. No cameras in the lower shaft. No guards near the service bay. Almost. There, she said, breath short. Ryan followed without hesitation. For the first time since his crash, he wasn't a prisoner. He was hers, and she was risking everything. In the escape tunnel, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. We have minutes, she said. A transport pod sat ahead, powered and ready. But before they could reach it, voices echoed. Guards. 2 Ilari soldiers appeared, weapons drawn. Freeze, one shouted. Return the human. Varela stepped in front of Ryan. No, she said. They aimed their weapons. Varela of House Kane, you are under arrest for... She raised her hand, holding a device. A powerful magnetic pulse burst through the air. The guards dropped, unconscious. Ryan looked at her, stunned. You just... She shook her head. No time. They climbed into the pod. It launched with a loud hiss, vanishing into a tunnel of light. Inside, everything was quiet again. Ryan looked at her. You left everything behind. She nodded. I left nothing behind. I only found what matters. He took her hand. You saved me. No, she whispered. You saved me. As the stars passed by the window, she rested her head on his shoulder again. Not as a scientist, not as an alien, but as someone in love. Far behind them, the facility lights dimmed. and one cold voice spoke into a comm device. Let them run. They won't get far. Now she finally understands. The stars outside the small transport window drifted like quiet fireflies across the darkness. Varela sat in silence, curled against Ryan's chest. The hum of the ship surrounded them like a soft blanket, steady and warm. Her eyes were open, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere new, somewhere she had never been before. They had reached the outer zones, uncharted space, far from Alari systems. No patrols, no rules, just sky, stardust, and freedom. Ryan adjusted a panel on the wall. The ship was small, barely enough for 2 people, but to them, it felt infinite. You ever been out this far? He asked gently. Varela shook her head. No, this is the edge of my maps. He smiled. Then we start drawing new ones. That night, they sat on the floor of the sleeping bay, sharing warmth beneath a silver heat blanket. Varela stared at her hands. I don't feel like them anymore, she said quietly. You're not, Ryan replied. She looked up. But I'm not fully human either. Ryan took her hands in his. You're you. That's more than enough. There was no science in what they shared now. No studies, no formulas, only breath, skin, heartbeats, silence that spoke louder than words. And when she finally kissed him, it wasn't out of curiosity. It was out of understanding, not a question, but an answer. Afterward, she lay beside him, head resting against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her cheek. Thump, thump, thump. A rhythm, a song, a truth. She whispered, Now I know. He blinked. Know what? What intimacy really is, she said. It's not about the act. It's about the giving, the choosing, the knowing that you could be anywhere. But you're here. Ryan smiled softly. Exactly. Later, she stood by the small window, wrapped in a soft blanket, eyes watching the stars. In her hand, she held a tiny device, the last data key from the Alari labs. She slid it into the panel. A small screen flickered to life. Her own voice played back. Subject shows signs of emotional attachment. Observation unclear. Subject's behavior is confusing. She paused the playback. That was the old her, cold, curious, empty. She deleted the file. Then she whispered to the stars, I'm not observing anymore, I'm living. In the following weeks, they landed on a green moon, untouched by the colonies. Quiet lakes, tall silver trees, wildflowers that glowed under starlight. Together, they built a small shelter. Part metal, part nature, no cameras, no tests. Just days filled with warmth and quiet joy. She laughed for real now. She touched his face without fear. She rested her head on his shoulder, not as a question, but as a home. One night, under a sky filled with 3 moons, she looked at Ryan and said, Do humans marry? He chuckled. Some do. She stepped closer. What does it mean? He looked into her glowing eyes. It means I choose you. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially then. She nodded. Then I choose you too. They didn't need rings. The stars were witnesses. The night was enough. Sometime later, she placed a hand on her stomach. Her breath caught. Ryan noticed. What is it? She looked at him, her eyes full, soft. Afraid. Hopeful. I think. I'm becoming more human than I ever imagined. He stepped toward her, hand over hers. We'll face it together, he said. She nodded and smiled. For the first time, Varela understood the deepest meaning of connection. It wasn't survival. It wasn't function. It wasn't duty. It was love, messy, human, real, and she wouldn't trade it for all the stars in her sky.